Well, hey there, you're on the internet. Please ignore the bandages, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink is by the very famous brand of MontBlanc. It's their brown ink. I believe it's the only brown they have. They have a couple of reds, several blues, but yeah, I believe it's their only brown, at least to date. It's MontBlanc's Toffee Brown. Have it here in sample form. I've actually never tried it either in bottle or cartridge. Most of my MontBlanc inks that I own are in cartridge, but I've heard very good things and wanted to give it a try. So yeah, there we go. Now the two pens I used were these. This is an Ohto Tasche with a fine nib, and throughout the test I call it a Japanese fine nib, but honestly I'd say it's just like a moderate Western fine. So that's one of the pens, and then the other one is my pride and joy. It is both my first fountain pen, my first real fountain pen, and my grail pen. It is this. This is my MontBlanc 144, because yes, it's the pop top kind, and I love it. I love this thing. And of course, I use my fountain pens. Like anytime I travel, this one comes with me. So no, it is not in pristine condition. And they stopped making them a long time ago. Well, not that long. I think, what, like late 90s? But something like that. Early 2000s. But yeah, so I love this thing. And like many MontBlanc nibs, it does run a little on the broad side, but this is a medium. And yeah, sorry about the tape. It's just... my name's on there, and I sort of don't want my whole name on the internet. So, there we go. But yeah, so those are the two pens. Love this pen. Pride and joy. But anyways, felt appropriate to use a MontBlanc ink and a MontBlanc pen, especially since I had one. So, yeah, let's do some comparisons. So here's MontBlanc Toffee Brown over here, and Stipula Sepia. Remarkably similar, except I'd say maybe there's just a hint of red undertone in this. Private Reserve's Chocolate Brown, which I own in cartridges, but this is actually a sample from a bottle. KWZ of Poland's Brown number 4. Well, actually, hang on. This, very, very similar. Like, surprisingly similar. But yeah, anyways, KWZ's Brown number 4, obviously not an iron gall, but as you can see, it's a bit lighter, and actually I'd say there's maybe just a little bit more hint of red in there. But speaking of browns with hints of red, here's Noodler's Beaver. This one has a bit more red too, but honestly I'm really looking forward to trying that one out. But yeah, so there you go, comparisons for Toffee Brown. Now, please do bear with me, I'm going to attempt to zoom in, and it's never graceful. Okay. Sorry, my hand is making this a little difficult today. Yeah. So, the one on the left, the one with the little D up at the top, that is the one that I let dry, which admittedly is not how you're supposed to do it, but I do what I want. Anyway, so here on the regular one, you can definitely see where that initial drop was put, or the initial line, but just faintly, and then faintly what's going up, and you can see this is actually sort of a chalky red. There's definitely like a red quality to this, then it goes up, gets a bit darker, turns into more of a brown, and I really hope this shows up on camera. There's green right along there, just along the edge, and I'll bring it in closer afterwards so you can get a better look. But now the dried version is largely the same. I'd say maybe the initial dot is just a bit darker, maybe there's just a bit more resistance going up, but it's all largely the same, except maybe the green just here is a bit more noticeable. So I'm going to bring it in now. So I just thought that was interesting. Just wanted to draw your attention to it, just because I thought that was a little fascinating. But yeah, and it's here too. But yeah, so yeah, all right. So chemical tests. Water really got it moving, but it also kind of made a mess when I went to sop it up. 1/3 bleach solution had a rather interesting effect on it. It didn't completely get rid of it, it almost seemed to bring out those red undertones quite a bit. And then, I don't know if the camera's really showing this, but there is a hint of blue. There we go. Where it did start to break it up, which I thought was rather fascinating. Now, ammonia pen flush did break it up and get it moving, but honestly not quite as much as water, and I think that's just from the ammonia in the pen flush started to mess with the paper. Now, hydrogen peroxide, much the same, also started to freak out the paper, so I softened it up rather quickly. But yeah, most Mont Blanc inks are very water soluble because these are fancy schmancy pens. They don't want anything to happen to them, and I think like it's even in the booklet when you buy the pen, like you're obligated or something to use Mont Blanc inks. And since these pens are not easy to disassemble, they want them to be very easy to clean out. Yeah, so yeah, they're gonna want inks that are easy to, you know, dissolve, easy to wash out, because they don't want anything to happen to these pens, because you get, as long as you buy them from a licensed retailer, you get like a lifetime warranty. So they don't want to have to deal with much of a mess. So, but yeah. So anyways, paper test, top down in density, Clairefontaine 90 grams per square meter. Now this is a very lovely shade of brown. I really like sort of that chestnutty brown color, the you know, the soft, like just hints of red undertones, really quite nice. And we get some lovely shading. We see it here. So I'm just going to call it the fine, because I do think it's just sort of a moderate Western fine. That took 14 seconds to dry. The slightly wet Mont Blanc medium took 23, and I think you can tell from the smears, there's actually a decent bit of ink in this ink. I mean, even here in the lighter areas, like in the writing, there's still like a noticeable like color to it. It's solid. I do really like this shading. I like where it's thinner, it almost starts to take on a slightly gold quality, but where it's laid on more heavily, you get more of the hints of red. Really quite nice. And I just made a note here that there was starting to be environmental factors on the paper, because as you can see, so right at the edge of the page. So, but the most part, perfectly fine. No bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. That's just a flaw in the paper. So it's very well behaved in that regard. Quite enjoying the color. The flow was actually maybe just a bit wet, but yeah, water test. Yeah, it's really gone. There's just a little tiny bit left, and it dyed the page, but that's kind of about it. Now, next up is Fabriano Eco Qua. It's an 85 gram per square meter paper. It's my favorite, especially the more I use it, the more I love it. Yeah. Just lovely brown color. It's a very straightforward brown, but it has some subtleties to it that I quite enjoy. Now the fine is 17 seconds, and man, look at that smear. And that slightly wet Mont Blanc medium took 25. And again, just look at the density of color in the smear. But yeah, we have very nice shading in the writing, and you can even see it in that fine. We can especially see it in the scrubby. And I don't know if this is going to show up. Oh, yeah, kind of. So I don't even know if this is a color of sheen, but it's some kind of sheeniness, and we get it in the writing as well. It's just, I know for a fact it'll be harder to get on camera. But yeah, so what you see here, these sort of dark spots that turn into like dark outlines and then start to sheen, we get it in the darker parts of the writing. But yeah, very well behaved, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo. If that is sheen, then that is sheen, but yeah, very well behaved. Again, did make a bit of a mess, because, you know, these inks are meant to be water soluble, so they did dye the page, and a lot of it is gone, and actually the camera is increasing the contrast just a little bit. So you can see that, but just barely, and it's sort of a chalky red, kind of like the rest of the dyed page. There's maybe half of each letter, so not be easy to recover. Now, next up is Rhodia. It's an 80 gram per square meter paper. It's got a ceramic coating in the pressing process. I feel like pretty much everyone's fairly familiar with this stuff. But yeah, that fine took 16 seconds to dry. That fairly wet medium took 21. And again, I feel like you can see the density of the color. Now, you can see the lines from the quadrilateral throughout, but not so much where it gets darker, which is kind of nice. And the color is, it's pretty intense. And in some areas, you can really start to see that sort of reddish undertone. which is quite nice, but where it's thinner you get more of that soft tan color. I really like all the different browns that you see here. It's quite nice. But yeah, no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen on here. And that's another thing I love about Fabriano. It tends to be able to handle inks that other papers struggle with, and also brings out qualities that sometimes you won't see until you get to paper more like Tomoe River. But anyways, back to Rhodia. Water test, really, really gone. It's really, really gone. It dyed the page just a little bit, but there's next to nothing left. Yeah, I mean, again, the camera is increasing the contrast just a little bit. That is not easy to read. Speaking of Tomoe River, though, Tomoe River, which is known for drawing out shading and sheen and dry times and echo, and it pretty much did across the board. Yeah, but I don't know if it's the cream quality of the paper, because this is a cream colored paper, but it seems as if there's just a slight change in the color quality that you might especially see in the scrubby. Here I feel like it brings out more of the gold in the brown, whereas I feel like on these other white papers it tends to sort of make it more easy to see the red undertones. But yeah, I actually still quite like it on here. It's a soft leather brown, really quite nice. Yeah, great shading in the writing, great shading in the scrubby. That fine nib took 19 seconds, that medium took 29, so just got under there. I usually stop counting at 30, but look at the size of those smears. It's intense. But yeah, also, so we get some of that outliney sheen like we saw in the Fabriano. Oh, why isn't the camera showing it? Oh, that's weird. But anyways, you can probably imagine where it is. It's right all through those darkest parts. But yeah. Yeah, it's great. No bleed, no feather, no spread. Maybe some echo, because where it is laid on pretty thick, it can get quite dark. And this is very thin paper. This is very, very thin paper. So yeah, if you're super sensitive to it, maybe something to consider before going into it. But there's absolutely no bleed or anything even remotely close to it. And the scrubby, that was me laying it on really heavy to see if I could get some more of that sheen. But yeah. Anyways, this paper is known for letting ink just slide away when you add more water. And it kind of did. I mean, it barely even dyed the page, because when I went to sop it up, it sort of took all of it with it. And again, the camera is increasing the contrast a little bit. That is much harder to see in person, what's left of the writing. But it is sort of that soft, chalky red like we saw in the chromatography. So, alright, so for the next 3 tests, I only use that fine, except to write the name, because these are the more economical papers. And this is, unequivocally, the worst 20-pound copier paper I have ever encountered. And in fact, it's one of the worst papers I've ever encountered, period. Which is really, really saying something. So yeah, chances are you have something at least a step up from this, if not several. So when I say we get some spread, so here's that same pen on Tomoe River. Here's the fine on here. That is a distinct increase in line width. In fact, if I bring this down, so that's the medium. And again, MontBlanc's nibs tend to run just a little large. Yeah. And then here we essentially have no shading. There's, well, okay, that medium being a little wet. Of course, there's some feathering there. And there is a bit of feathering here. But it's not really huge distracting feathers. It's mostly an intense woolliness. At least mostly. I mean, undertones, the end of undertones is getting a little ugly, but yeah, could be a lot worse. I still kind of like the brown color. It's a very simple brown, but it's not dull, it's not dusty. It's quite nice. Yeah, and admittedly, there's more bleed than I'd like to see from a fine nib. Granted, I would say that it's more like a Western fine, and I'd say the ink is just slightly on the wet side, like maybe a 5.5. But I'd still like to see better if I could, but, you know, I'm not going to push it. Now, this paper does tend to absolutely freak out when you add water, and it kind of did. You can physically see where the paper changed shape. And it really freaked out. It feathered and exploded, and actually I was mopping this up quite quickly, because as you might be able to tell, like, can you see this? like right along here, and then up through here and up through here. The paper started to act like chromatography paper, where it just wanted to suck the ink in and bring it further up the page. So I actually sopped this up incredibly quickly because I couldn't believe how quickly the paper was trying to absorb the water. So to keep it from just taking over the page, I was like, So yeah, honestly, if I had given it more time, it probably would have gotten worse. Yeah, next up is Mead Notebook Paper. This is the type of mead you'd find in like a spiral notebook, not the kind you'd find in like a composition book. Those tend to have more of a newsprint quality. This stuff, honestly, it's been feathering like crazy lately, which we do see here. I mean, if we look at the B in better, if my camera will ever focus, the H and then, quick, loved, but as you'll also see, it's not everywhere. So like foxes are okay, some's okay, brown's fine, fine's not fine, but, and like brown is kind of okay, toffee not so much. But yeah, the name, that was written with the Mont Blanc in medium, but still. But as you can probably see on here, we still have shading. Yeah, so we still get some shading on here, which is rather nice. And if I sort of compare it to this 20 pound, we can see that we don't get nearly as much spread. In fact, we get almost none, which is quite nice. So there is that. And there's no bleed. There's that's the water test. But there's no bleed, absolutely none. There is a bit of echo, just because, I mean, this is very thin paper. This is a fairly dark brown ink. So just something to keep in mind. But you see how it's absolutely nowhere near the other side? Very nice, good to see. But this paper does tend to freak out when you add water, and here it most certainly did. Yeah, it like, I don't know, it just spread out and then sort of doubled over itself. It's a mess. Yeah, not great. But yeah. Anyways, lastly is Moleskine, which I hate because it's terrible. It's really terrible paper, and they make you pay a lot of money for it, and I don't think that's good. I don't think that's fair. But yeah, here, again, I feel like, because this is a cream colored paper as well, I feel like it affected the color, where again it sort of brought out a bit more of the gold undertones rather than the red. So it took 2.5 seconds for it to dry on Copier Paper, took 2 seconds to dry on Mead, took 4.5 on Moleskine, and here you can really see the woolly texture. You can see the pulp they mashed into paper, and I just want you to see how intense this feathering is. It is huge and distracting. It completely changes the texture of the writing. It is very unattractive. It's just terrible. And then we get this. This actually rendered onto the page below in a few spaces, and it is so clearly readable from the back of the page that it is just, that is not forgivable to me. So yeah. And as bad as the water test we've seen so far, that's almost amazing. Yeah, that's just hideous. That's ugly. I wrote that, and I probably couldn't tell you where one letter ends and the next begins. I hate Moleskine. I really, really do. I feel like I don't need to explain why anymore, because that's just, it speaks for itself at this point. So yeah, there you go. There is MontBlanc's Toffee Brown. It's a lovely brown color. On white papers, you can really see this, like, you know, this nice red chestnutty undertone. On cream color papers, it really brings out more of the gold. You get sort of like a rich leathery brown. I can't speak to toffee. I'm not a big fan of toffee, and most of the toffees I've had are more of a butterscotchy kind of color. So I don't know about that, but the brown, fur brown, is quite lovely. It's very nice. Yeah, so there you go for your consideration from the Triple N Network. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.